Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Srini here. So this is my next subsequent video in my playlist, fifth video in my playlist of API automation series, guys. And today we are going to look at the API automation framework, right? So we're going to start with that particular topic. But before we go to the topic, we would have to start with one real life example for an API automation, right? So what we had seen in the last lecture was for some dummy API, but now we are going to look at some subsequent lectures which is going to be focusing on one real-time API. We will be seeing all the aspects of how to hit the API, how to write the automation script, right? And even we'll be able to look at how the assertions are done, how to create a framework from scratch. So you'll be able to learn all of those basics and complete framework designing and the implementation part in this particular subsequent videos. So stay tuned for that. And if you're new to this channel, I would strongly recommend go ahead and subscribe to it and hit the bell to get notifications. And if you have any queries or if you would want me to take any topics, feel free to send me an email at this email address. So let's get started. So we're going to look at one real life example, that is JIRA API, right? So JIRA is one of the open source API which is available for free for everyone to try and do automation. And the reason I've chosen JIRA API is because we all at some point of time would have used JIRA, be it for manual testing or for raising defects or storing test cases or doing execution, defect tracking, etc. So this is used widely across so many organizations today. So it does make everyone's job easier if they understand with respect to a common application used in today's world, that is Jira. Then it will be very easy to understand for anyone who are new to API automation, right? So we're going to look at Jira automation. So what are the going to be key takeaways from this particular session? So I'm going to try my best to make sure that I cover all these three topics in this session. So the first one is that we will be able to get out of the session how to install Jira. So Jira server we will have to download, and this particular session would cover that. You will also be able to understand how to use the Jira API. So I will be letting you all know how to use the API documentation for Jira application, how to read it, how to execute it with respect to Postman or with respect to doing any framework automation from a API perspective. How do we use that API? We are going to look at that. And if we get time, we will be also be able to look at the third topic, which is how to design the framework structure for the API automation framework. Yeah, and the implementation part of course will be segregated across multiple sessions, so don't worry at all about that. So let's get started. So the first thing what you have to do is that we are going to take Jira as an example. We have already seen about the Postman basics in our previous lecture, and prior to that we have also seen all the basics about rest assured API, right, and about web services and difference between all of the two, right? So you can go across my previous sessions. I will drop a link for the same in this particular video and then come back to this session. So let's get started. So firstly, you would have to visit to a official website of rest assured, so that you would have to download the jars. So as we do for any particular functionality, if we have to use something, right, it is all being packaged into a jar or a war file, etc. So whatever may be the packaging structure, we have to look at that and we have to download it and add it to our project, right? So whatever project we will be using, we just have to add that particular jar to our build path. That is the main thing what we have to do in order to work with the rest assured API, right? So I've already shown how to do that. You just have to go to the project and do a right click and just go to the build path and add the jar. So let me go back to window. Yeah, so this is the official website for the rest assured, and they have just given a sample JSON here, right? And if you look at this, they have also given a sample test case if you want to hit with the rest assured, how to go about and do that. So if you are new to this, don't worry at all. I'll be covering everything from the basics, right? So this is all what with an example they've given, and they've given some release notes also. Now what we are mostly interested on is the documentation part and the downloading part. So let's go to the bottom section. So here you can see there is a section for downloads. So just do a right click and open that downloads. This particular page will be opened up. Here there are downloads mentioned. This is what we need to download for the jars. So you have to ensure that you download this first one, JSON path, XML path. That's all what you require from the first three. No need for Spring these two not required for now, because these are with respect to advanced Java framework. You need JSON schema validator, and I think that's all for now. These four are required for sure for you to work with API automation using REST assured. So make sure that once you download the zip file, you extract it, and there might be some other subfolders within the zip file, like a lib folder or some other folder, etc. Right? So just ensure all the jars which are present in different subfolders are taken together and they are added to our project. So how to do that? I'll again just show you as a sample. So just put it into one folder called lib and just copy paste the lib folder, which would be having all the jars collection, right? Just add it to your project like this. You can just do right click and do paste of your lib. Once you've done that, go to build path, go to configure build path, and you just have to add the libraries to your project, right? Right. So once you have added the jars to your build path, just do apply and close, and that's it. You are all set with your project to go ahead and get started with rest assured. Right. So this is how you can download the jars for your rest assured and get started. Now let's look into our topic today. So today we are going to start with the looking at the topic of JIRA. So JIRA is going to be like a real-time application. So this is the documentation part which I have opened up. So you can just go to Google and you can just say JIRA API documentation. Just say JIRA API documentation, and you will be getting a link for the documentation part. Yeah, so you can go for this link. So this is the complete link of the entire API documentation. So whenever you are going to work with any API, just ensure that you go across the documentation part, because that is having the instructions of how to use the API. Only when we know how to use the API, what particular payload to be provided, what particular endpoint URL to be given, only then you will be able to interact with the API, right? Or you can use Postman only when you know what particular payload to give in the body, like for example, this one, right? Or what particular header to pass, or what particular endpoint URL to pass. So you need to get all of those information from the API documentation, right? So let's now look at how do we install JIRA in this particular session. So for that, I have got a link here, right? So you just have to, I'll just put this link in my video description. So you just have to download JIRA and you have to follow this link and just click on this particular download button. So this is available for Windows and for other operating systems, which is mentioned here. So I have Windows 64-bit. I'm just selecting that option. So just remember this, that this is available for free as a trial period for 30 days. So you have to make sure that you do a practice whatever you want within this 30 days trial period, and try to save your code and your framework, etc. And try do as much of practice so get a lot of confidence, so that you can go with the other API examples also, which is available in real time, and apply the same similar logic also, right? So I'll just go ahead and download in this particular session as a live part, because I don't have JIRA at this. I'll just be doing it for the first time. So I'm going to agree to the terms and conditions. Let's get started. So it's downloading. So we'll just wait for that to download and then we will continue with the session. So you can see now that the recording that what we were doing is that we were downloading the JIRA. So now the JIRA software has been downloaded successfully. Now we'll just see the installation of JIRA, and we will also see how to create our own account and then get started with JIRA. Right? So let's go ahead and install JIRA. I'll just double click on this. So you have to go through the entire installation process. It's a very simple process. You just go on doing next and go with the standard installation, whatever it is suggesting to you. Yeah. So do you want to allow this app to make changes? Let's say yes. Okay. So you have to install it like an administrator. So let me just continue without admin, like a normal installation. And yeah, so we have to choose the express install, that is going to use a default setting. So let's go ahead and do next. We'll keep the same setting. and allow access and install. So wait for the installation to complete, and then we'll have to create one account with Jira, and that account is nothing but going to be like a license kind of a key that will be valid only for 90 days. So after 90 days we will not be allowed to use the Jira software. This Jira software is nothing but the Jira server. So this is the server to which we are going to hit our APIs, and we will have a user ID with which we are going to log in. So once this installation is complete, I'll show you how to create an account. So let this get completed, then we can continue. So it's almost going to be completed now, the installation part. Just give it a minute and then we can get started with the configuration part. Yeah, so it's almost done now. Okay, so it's just configuring it. We'll just give it a moment. Yeah. So installation of Jira is complete. You'll get this kind of a message, right? And once you get this message, just go ahead and do next. It's going to launch the Jira software, and you will be shown one default URL. So it's like a welcome URL when you come to Jira, and you have to do user registration. So it's going to start the Tomcat server for launching the Jira server. Yeah, so installation is now ready and can be accessed via your browser. Note that if you close this window, you will shut down Jira software. So let's launch Jira in a browser. So let's click on finish. So it's going to open that in your default window, whichever is your default window. It's going to open that. So let's just wait for this to sync actually, because this has to be completely up and running. The Jira server, the Apache Tomcat should be up and running. So let's refresh it again. So this is going to be the default URL with which you will have to access the Jira. And let's just try to search it. Yeah, so Jira server. Start Jira. So you can just go to start options and just go to the section where you can see Jira, right? So just go to Jira. Yeah, so go to Jira software and go to start Jira server, and the Jira server will be started. And then once it's up and running, you can just, yeah, so it's the Tomcat one, and just refresh this page. Let me open up that in the Chrome window. So we just have to refresh this page. So once the server is up, this particular website should be up and running. Now you can see that Jira server is up and running. So this is the URL which we are going to basically hit it, right? Localhost 8080 startup.jsp. So now that the server status, you can see it's saying starting the Jira plugin system. So once you get these kind of messages in your Tomcat console window, that means Jira is getting ready, and it will take time initially for this setup to happen. But once this particular setup is done, it's just going to be like normal login. So now your Atlassian Jira is now ready. So it's going to ask you to register it for the first time, and then it will create the license key. Okay. So here we are on the main screen. So this is what we have to do. We have to first go ahead with the default option, set it up for me. So I'm going to go to continue to my Atlassian. And here is the part. We have to create an account. You can see the option to sign in, but we have not got an account with Atlassian yet. So go ahead and sign up for an account and use the email address which you want to use. So I'm going to use my email address, what are we used for this particular channel, right? Okay, I'll just click on sign up. So once you have to just confirm on the email address part. If you confirm on the email address, then this particular setup is complete. So let's go ahead and verify it. So I have gone ahead and confirmed my email address. So I should be able to come back to this page from that previous page and just click on this already have an Atlassian account login, because we have activated our account by clicking on the confirmation of email address. Now let's go ahead and continue with the login part. So once you have logged in, you should be able to see such kind of a screen, right? So there are going to be two options shown to you for the evaluation license part. This is the part where we are going to just get the license for a trial period of 90 days. So there will be two options shown here. You just have to go ahead and select the first option, JIRA software server. So what this option means is that we are going to have our entire application deployed onto a single server rather than having it on a data center kind of a thing. We are going to have it to a single server. So let's go ahead and select it. And organization, we can type any organization, any characters. It doesn't have any kind of a validation. So this is going to be the server ID. So you can just copy it for your understanding and then click on generate license. So you'll have a license key like that getting generated and for the server. And if you see here, it says support expires on 7th October 2019. So we have to just do our practice within that. So let's go ahead and click on yes. So 7th October in the sense, then it's just a trial period for 30 days. So that means you have to use the Jira within 30 days, even though, we might want to practice more, but it's just that 30 days we have time to practice Jira. So let's go ahead and type our email address and let's just do the login part. Okay, that's the part we need to do. It's the admin account setup. So this is the user ID with which we are going to log into Jira, and I'll show you how the look and feel looks like. Let's click on next. So still there are few things to get set up, and then we should be able to look into the home page of Jira, which I know almost all of you all would have worked so far in your testing career. So that is the UI which we are used for, logging defects and tracking test cases, etc. I'll just wait for this to get completed. So as you can see, the installation is about to complete for the setup of Jira server. It will be on the last step now, and then we should be able to look at the home page. Yeah, so it's finishing the setup, and now let's look at the homepage. It depends on the speed and all that. So yeah, so it's all done now, and it says that Jira is ready to go, and the login details are the email address and password which you had given. So the Jira instance can be accessed through any web server if you enter this particular address. So if you want to log into Jira any point of time, you have to save this particular URL and just log into that. So just you can save it to a notepad, and then you can use this to access the Jira homepage URL. So let's get started. So in this particular session, what you would be doing is that you would just look at the look and feel of Jira, how to create a project, and how it looks like overall. And in the next session, we will just start using Postman API tool to create some kind of different activities. Like we can create a defect in Jira through Postman, and we can look at how the entire API operation works with respect to Jira. Once we understand how the entire operation works, then we just have to go into the principles of rest assured and see how to create a basic framework from scratch. So that will be our plan of action. So we'll just wait for this page to get loaded. This installation process will actually take some good amount of time. So just give it some time, and once it's done, you can all get started with your API automation testing. It's very easy to just go on practicing it for an entire month. Just the initial setup will take some time. Yeah, so it's getting launched now. Okay, so let's get continued with the setup. So we are going to select the English language, click on continue. Okay, that's fine. We can choose an avatar. I'll go with any normal one and click on next. Yeah, so here we go. We have got different options now. So let's just see the project in action, or let's create new project. I've just clicked on the second option, and there are different options shown now. I'll just go ahead and select the default one shown to me, that is the Agile Scrum Software Development Project. I'll click on next. You can also import a project if you have any existing project saved with you. You can do that, or just go ahead with the selection of any project. So let's go with some software development. Yeah, so this is the overall workflow diagram. So if you are not aware of how this entire thing works, just take a screenshot of this particular thing. So we basically get a to do, then we change it to in progress, and then we do it as done for the status of the bug. So this is the entire life cycle of the bug, right? So let's go ahead and select it. Just give it a name. So I'm going to say Jira test. So if you see the abbreviation or the key is nothing but the first three characters of your project name. So let's go ahead and submit it. So it's just creating the project for us. Yeah. So it's created now, and you can just click on close for this particular pop-up. So this is how it will look like. So for your project now, you don't have any backlog. So there are no issues as such created. So we are going to create the issue through our APIs, right? So that is the main plan of action. We are not going to do anything through this Jira UI. We are going to make our API create or update whatever we want to, and then the same action we are going to do it through our automation framework, right? So that is why we would be requiring all those jars which we have downloaded initially when we have downloaded the jars from the rest assured folder. So that was the main part of it, right? For doing automation, we have to have the jars. So we have already downloaded that. So that we are going to see in our next session how to do the automation through API. right? So now let's come into this particular section. So if you click on this project section, click on this drop down, and you can look at this. Like if you just click on this drop down, you are shown the current project as JIRA test, abbreviation JIR. So that means whatever I want to do any operation, if I want to reflect in this JIRA project, I should be making sure that I connect to this particular project. Then only I will be able to do whatever updates I want to. So there could be multiple projects here. As of now, there is only one current project. There could be multiple projects. So that is why there is view all projects option here, right? You can create one more project as well. So if whatever the user is giving the project name through the API, that particular project will be having all the changes recorded. So that we have to understand, right? So now let me go back to Postman. So this is how our Postman looks like. Now, an important thing to understand here is that in Postman and for this JIRA application, right? Always there is some kind of authentication in any application if you take, right? So if you go for any application, maybe regress.in, whatever default website we had looked at, dummy website last session, that did not had any authentication. It was just a dummy website. But any other website like a real-time examples like Twitter, Jira or Facebook or Google, etc., right? They all would be having their APIs exposed, but only to those users who are an authenticated user, who have purchased their services, right? Maybe they might have purchased like a trial version like this one, what we have purchased now for 30 days, or some user may have purchased it for a year or two. So it depends upon which user is trying to log in. If it's an authenticated user, they have some authentication key, right? Then they should be able to allow to get access to API and even hit the APIs and do creation, updation, or retrieval of information. That's how the API works. It works on the authentication principle. Similarly, in Jira, we have an authentication here, but that authentication is a bit different. So that is why I have opened up a link here so that I can explain you all how the authentication works in Jira API. So it works on the basis of cookie based. So if you go to this particular website, cookie based authentication part for Jira, right? So if you see, this is a very useful guide here. In this particular guide, they have given in detail as to how to use this particular authentication part in Jira, right? So this is how this works in a high level. Let's understand it. This is how the cookie based authentication works in Jira at a high level. The client or nothing but the user will create a session, right, for the user via the Jira REST API. So when I say a Jira REST API means I need the endpoint URL. So whatever endpoint URL we have given here, this is how we have to give the URL to get ourselves authenticated, right? And we will be getting a value in the response. So I'll just show you that. Let's go back to the first step. So that endpoint URL we have given by the Jira REST API, and we have to create a new session. So we are going to get the session key. So Jira will basically return in response a session object that has information about the session. Basically, it's like a cookie or a session. So whenever we basically log into any website, right, there will be a kind of a information or note mention that please do this action for within 30 minutes or within 15 minutes, etc. Otherwise, the session might get expired because there is a time limit for a session. Similarly, for this particular session ID, which is returned back in the response, right? Once we hit this particular Postman, once we hit this post request, we will be getting a session ID. So that session ID is going to be valid for a certain period of time. It depends upon every API. They have their authentication and the time limit of the session. Similarly, Jira will also have a time limit. So after that, if you try to use the same session ID, the API request will throw you authentication invalid error because it is going to treat as if the session is not a valid one, and it is going to ask the user to authenticate again. That is why it's always important to ensure you do the activities sooner within the same session or use the same session ID. The third step is that client can now set the cookie, whatever they have got the session object here in the response, they can set the cookie for their subsequent API calls, right, to the Jira REST API using that cookie as a header. So basically they don't have a authentication key here. They don't have any authentication or authorization section here. This is not used by Jira. This particular thing is not used by Jira. Instead, they believe that you should be sending me header. And what is the header? They are expecting us to send cookie. This particular cookie is what they are expecting us with a value of some session ID. some session ID we have to provide here, through which it will be able to authenticate that, okay, this is a valid user. So how are we going to achieve that, right? So for that, first we have to do is, we have to first, yeah, so this is not required, so I'm going to delete it. Yeah. So first what we are going to do is, we are going to pass a header here. We are going to pass a body here. Now in the body, we have to pass the username and password for Jira, right? This is the endpoint URL to be passed. The action has to be post, because we are going to post some data, right? That is why the action is post. We are going to put some payload, and it's a form of JSON. So that is why if you see here, the content type is application/JSON. Give this username and password, whatever the user session we are having, and then go ahead and click on send button. So I'm just pausing here to enter my username and password, and then we'll continue to hit the Jira API. So once you have given all the information for the body in that particular JSON format, you have given the header information. So we have got one header here, that is the content type is going to be application/JSON, right? We don't have any authorization here. It's completely empty, because we are basically creating a session, and that particular session is going to serve like a cookie, which is going to be passed in the subsequent APIs. So let's go ahead and click on save first. See, when you click on save, it will sync your data, whatever changes you have made to this particular API request to your collection, and it's going to hit that, right? So let's click on send. So you see that now in the response, we have got a JSON response payload, and this particular JSON response payload is having a session ID. This is called as JSession ID. So this particular session ID, we have to just copy, and we have to go to another API which I have created here, called as creating an issue in Jira, right? So just we'll go ahead and pass that particular session ID here. So it's basically, the header has to be named as cookie, and whatever JSession ID you have got there, you have to replace it here. So what we'll do is, we are just going to replace that entire part here. Okay, so seems to be we have not copied the value, so we have got this value, so we have to get this one and put it here, right? So that's it. Then just click on save, it will sync it, and let's check the body if we have, got that particular data and everything entered, right? So here now, this is the just a sample request which I just wanted to explain you all. So in the previous API, what we have done, let me just tell you all, right? We have just created a session. We have passed the headers, whatever we had, right? We had just passed one header, that is the content type application JSON. In the body, we had given a format of username and password. And when we hit the API, we got the response with the JSession ID. It was as simple as that. I'll give you all the endpoint URLs and the payload information as well. We have just copied the JSession ID, and we are going to hit the other one. But here you have to give the project key. So this project key is the abbreviation part, which I was talking about, the first three characters of the project, right, where we want to update. So here the abbreviation is JIR, right? So let's enter JIR, and I've just given some information in this payload format. Now let's click on save, and then let's click on send. So it has to create a defect in Jira. So it gave unauthorized here, because we took some time for this to happen. We have not immediately done. So always it's the good practice to immediately hit the subsequent request, because I was explaining you all the entire process part. So it basically got timed out. So let's do it again. Let's click on send once more. It's going to create a new session. Now let's just directly copy it and paste it here, right? So we are going to put it in the creating issues in Jira. Yes, so we have to go to this particular session ID. So let's just replace this value. And click on save quickly and click on send. So let's just see if something has gone wrong here. So there is no space here, it's cookie and it's JSession ID. Let's try once more. Yeah. So this could be some temporary issue which you might get. So if you see the response here, right, it has created a response, and the response code is 201 created. It means request has been fulfilled and resulted in a new resource being created. It has given you how much time it has taken, and this is the issue ID number, and this is the link for the same. So let's copy this link. If you want to just double check if it has created properly, let's just put the link here. It will redirect to that. Or if you want, yeah, so it has given in this kind of a JSON format. So better if you want to directly look at that, just refresh this particular project. So you can see now that I had already done one for testing purpose, and now once more I have hit it. So the same data I have passed here. So it has given JIR2, the second issue being created. If I open this one, it will just open up the issue ID on the right hand side. So this is how through API we have created a sample issue, and you can see the reporter is my email address. This is the user which has reported the defect. So this is all being done through Postman API. We are going to look at the similar action of passing this particular data, but everything through automation framework. That's our goal. But we have to first understand how it works via Postman. That is why I have just taken this in sample example of creating a defect. And there are so many features in this Jira. We can change the status, we can change the priority, we can update the defect, we can add some other details to this particular defect. So we are going to look at all of those particular things in our next session. So I hope this particular session was very useful to you all in understanding Jira and how the setup works, how the authentication works from a session perspective. So we are going to continue with the next session, and then we'll look into the automation framework. Thank you. So if you like this video, do share with your friends and ask them to share, like, and subscribe this particular channel. Thank you so much.